Hi, and welcome to Dark Window. I'm your host, Jim Mann. Here on this program, I will be talking with many of the leading investigators, researchers, and authors on the topics of UFOs, UAPs, alien abductions, extraterrestrials, and a host of many other fascinating and related topics. So please join me and my guest for the next hour as we reach out. This is Dark Window on KGRA Digital Broadcasting. And hello, everyone. I am Jim Mann, your host here on Dark Window. Now, tonight I have a very special guest again, coming back for the second time, James Keenan. Now, James, I've known James for a number of years. James is an author. He's a field investigator. He has a degree in interdisciplinary studies from the University of California at Santa Barbara. His main focus having been anthropology and archaeology over the years. He conducts investigations and technology, data collection at sites around the world that appear to be connected with our distant and ancient past. He spent 20 years as law enforcement he spent 20 years in law enforcement and private investigation. James has appeared on numerous radio and podcast shows. His television appearances include the Travel Channel, the History Channel, Gaia. James has appeared on two seasons or season two, not two seasons, but he's appeared on season 2 of the History Channel series, The Secret of Skinwalker Ranch. And the thing about James that I so appreciate is he is a genuine boots on the ground investigator. And so, James, welcome tonight. How are you doing?
Hi, Jim. I'm doing well. Thanks for having me back on.
There you are. Well,
hiding out.
Yeah, this is your second time here. You are a fascinating researcher, and you have been all over North and South America. And tonight, I'd like to talk a little bit about what's going on in Mesoamerica. I know you've done a lot of work down there. You've taken your ground penetrating radars, and you've taken your technology and your know-how, and you've gone down there. And I know you've made some discoveries. But before we get into that, let me just say that you have published some fascinating books.
Thanks.
Tell everyone just a little bit about this one here, real quick.
Yeah, sure. So I write fiction. Like you'd said earlier, I was in law enforcement and private investigation, but there is a bit of reality here and there put into it from personal experiences and also from what I've been interested in regards to like this distant remote past in history that archaeologists and anthropologists and historians aren't willing to admit was even possible. And so if I had written a non-fictional book, I probably wouldn't have had a job the next day or once it came out. So, kind of disguised it as best I could. I always like to tell everybody that probably about 30 or 40% of Dark Shadows and Catastrophe really happened, whether it be from my personal experiences or from the research that I've done in regards to the Mesoamerican cultures and the South American cultures and what more than likely really occurred based off of their oral traditions, artifacts that we have, and then just piecing together so much of the same occurrences or same sightings of beings or figures around the areas that it's unlikely that it could have been anything. It had to have been for real. It had to be the truth because so many different cultures and civilizations saw the same thing. And anthropologists and archaeologists state that, there was never this large transmission of language and information and data and commerce between these groups, that they were very localized, which just isn't the truth. So I've kind of put all of that into that Dark Shadows and Catastrophe. And then it's the second book in the series, which was 1022-2036.
Yeah, that's there it is. Um, Now, what's neat? Now, James, I've read part of the first book, or a good portion of the first book. Uh, Patricia has read both these books, and she loves them. And
Thank you.
she won't come on here and talk about it because she doesn't want to ruin it for me, which I can appreciate. But how does that second book correlate with the first book? I mean,
Yeah,
they're a
sure.
kind of
So I spent a lot of time trying to get a better understanding of Maya hieroglyphics and their writing. And what a lot of people don't understand is we just recently learned how to read Maya, the Mayan writing. And a lot of it is based off of one individual's journal entries. And that individual happened to be the one that burned most of the codices and scrolls that they had in the first place,
Mhm.
Landry, and caused, just major conflict during his time there in Mesoamerica. And then a lot of what we get comes from the current Maya people that are in central Mexico, in Guatemala, Honduras, parts of Mexico. And just like when you think about English, old English is very different than current English. And if you and I were to find this old English and try to translate it for somebody that didn't know, we would probably do it incorrectly. And so there's a lot, anthropologists and archaeologists make the public feel like they know everything and that it's pure science. And what we forget is it's just a social science, and a lot of it is a guessing game.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is speculation. Uh, and you can say they've taken a lot of data, and if a lot of data kind of sort of matches, they're going to try to create the best hypothesis that they possibly can, which is what occurs. But again, science is science. It's supposed to be proven incorrect, and then new theories brought about, and until finally we get to the truth. So I believe that a lot of it has been incorrectly interpreted. And in 1022, 2036, I go into a lot of the cataclysmic event theory that I believe the Maya were tracking, especially with the planet Venus, which was every codice that has remained from the pre-Columbian, which is only 4 of them, by the way. All they are doing is tracking and talking about Venus. And
Really.
yeah, and all the observatories, the observatory at Chichen Itza, everything was specialized and set up to track this one planet. And it's for a reason, because there were catastrophic events in a cyclical time frame that were more than likely occurring to our planet.
We seem to have, as a modern society, we seem to have a problem with updating our knowledge of our ancient past as the as new understandings come out. I have been just frustrated by that over the years. That
You and I both.
for people like you and others who have devoted a large portion of their life are finding these new factoids about our ancient past, and we can't seem to get together and get our histories updated so we really know what's going on and who we are. But tonight we're going to talk a little bit about um, Mesoamerica. Fascinating area, fascinating culture, and some amazing historical discoveries down there, correct?
Oh, yeah.
And where all have you been down there? I mean, I'm going to Patricia, can you pop up that map there that says, that second map there? Can you pop that one up? Yeah, now that's have are you familiar with all of these cultures and these?
I'm familiar with a large portion of them. I mean, don't get me wrong. There were a ton of cultures, and we continue to find areas and artifacts and locations that we're not quite sure who they were, and we've mislabeled groups that have this uh, who we think they are isn't really who they were. And on this map, I have not been to Honduras, but I have been to
Hmm.
Guatemala, to Mexico. I did a lot of my work, my archaeological work for my degree in the Yucatan. So I'm very familiar with the Maya civilization and all the way into northern Mexico. I grew up in El Paso, Texas, so
Hmm.
I, even from an earlier age, was in Mexico quite a bit and was always fascinated with the current and the past cultures and civilizations that existed there.
Right. You and Patricia, can you pop up that other map above that there? Now you're familiar with some of these cultures. Um, the ones that you have told me about, where you were doing the ground penetrating radar, and you found something down inside that appeared to be something large and possibly something metal.
Correct.
Uh, Now, on this map, where was that?
That's in the very upper left where you see the Aztlan stone giant. That
Oh,
would be
okay.
in Tula
The
with the
tall.
Toltec.
Okay,
Yeah, with the
okay.
Toltec culture. And yeah, that what happened was all those Aslan stone giants. They actually were at the base of the pyramid, and the anthropologists that did the original work thought it would look better to put them on top of the pyramid. So that's where they are now. But when we were using the 3D ground imaging system on top of the pyramid when we were there in June, I immediately located about 3 feet inside the pyramid metal object. And it almost looked disc like, probably about 12 to 15 inches in diameter. And that was on the very first pass. So
Really?
imagine what else hasn't been discovered. And the Toltec were so well known for their being metallurgists and especially dealing with gold. As a matter of fact, that entire pyramid was covered in gold until their decline, and then people came in and took it apart. But more than likely, we're probably talking about gold artifacts and objects that are within the pyramid that haven't been discovered yet. And now we have the technology to do it in a non-invasive manner. But in order to be able to excavate, that requires just a ton of permits and getting the correct authorities in Mexico, which I mean, it's Mexico.
It's Mexico.
It's next to impossible if you don't know the right person.
Well, I would imagine that it's similar to trying to get anything done in Egypt. Um,
Yeah, or New York City.
Now, where else in Mexico have you gone that you have done any of your research there?
Sure. So all over the Yucatan, including the island of Cozumel, which were the Maya, down into Oaxaca, also into La Venta, Veracruz area, which were what we know as the Olmec. Then in the area of Mexico City, it used to be Tenochtitlan. So we've investigated what are the Mexica or the Aztec as we know them, up into Tulu with the Toltec, then over to Teotihuacan and other parts of the Pacific coast where we had other Nahua or Nahuatl people. And there were just so many different cultures there.
Now, how old are these cultures that you've been in general? Are they BC? Are they just the last two
Well,
thousand years?
yeah, so it really depends. We're talking about minimum 3,700 years of history that we know of, beginning with what we now say are the Olmec as the first culture. But now we know that there's this proto-Olmec, that there were even before that, these artifacts that we're finding, and that they just weren't Olmec. But so the Olmec go back about 3,600 years, and then you have all the way up to the Aztec, which were when the Spaniards and the conquistadors came over and conquered Mesoamerica. and
Now,
South America.
the most popular, of course, Olmec uh, is the they. Patricia, can you pop up some of those Olmec pictures there? These folks look like they're either from Africa or they're Polynesian. They certainly don't look Mesoamerican. How do we explain that?
So
Or can we?
well, no, and you got to think about this from a logical perspective. It's really quite simple. They're just not willing to believe it, that it was a melting pot, that all these cultures and civilizations from all over the world were coming to Mesoamerica, which was a centralized location for commerce. And what that commerce was just a huge gamut of artifacts and objects that we see in other places around the world that they shouldn't be. And then you find stuff here too that, it shouldn't be. So I think over time, they're going to have to give in academia and say, yeah, these people were more seagoing or other, maybe there was alternative ways of transportation that we've just lost that technology, which is something that I track when I'm really looking at hieroglyphs, petroglyphs, pictographs, the iconography and codices and scrolls.
Is James, is there a chance that some of these cultures can be so ancient that the continents were actually closer together? Or,
You
I
know
mean, I
what?
know that's a stretch, okay?
Well, and it may very well be possible with what we know as Mu. And I say that because when you talk to the desert Southwest cultures that exist today, like the really old ones that were from the ancient Puebloans, which are the Zuni Hopi people, they talk about Mu's northeastern boundary actually having been what is now Utah. And that when there was a major catastrophic event, the elites survived underground in Utah with other beings, which the Zuni and Hopi consider the ant people, and these beings of great stature, which we will call them what they are, giants.
Giants.
So yeah, absolutely. Anything could be completely wiped out from the timeline and from history over 20, 25,000 years. Nothing will survive except for stone. And so, we see these megalithic structures that they were built for two reasons. One, the material was available, and two, it lasts better than anything else. Because when you look at what we create now, probably the only thing that'll last past 10 to 12,000 years are the stainless steel sinks that we all use. But even after time, those are going to
What about
deteriorate away.
plastic bottles?
Yeah.
Is it the thing that has always just baffled me is the buildings, the megalithic structures, these huge buildings. What is it with pyramids? Why do we find pyramids thousands of miles away in Africa and Egypt, and we find pyramid structures in Mesoamerica? What is it about the pyramids that why such a, I mean, they could have built a big square. They could have built a big round building, but they're all building pyramids.
Because we're all connected.
Yeah, I find that very, yeah.
It's all connected. And
I mean,
the technology was better.
Some of these pictures we have, these buildings are pyramids, similar to like this one here. And that one is, what'd you say this one was?
And Chichen Itza.
Chichen Itza. And I don't know how big it is, but look at these. These are pyramidal structures. And is it a coincidence that we find pyramids in Giza? What is the connection? I'm fascinated with that.
Yeah. The technology, the culture and civilizations were far more advanced than anyone's willing to admit in academia. You got to remember, they look at those people in the past as just coming out of having been hunter gatherers. But how the heck is that possible? How do you have the engineering and the architectural capabilities of what we just saw? After just finished having run after your dinner, and
Well,
then returning back to your cave. How is it that they go return back to a cave to live, but then these huge structures are what outside their cave? Come on, give me a break. I
what
mean,
if you were to make a list of the most fascinating discoveries that you have personally come across in your research, what would you say?
it would be
I mean,
Teotihuacan. Yeah, Teotihuacan in Mesoamerica on the Pacific coast um, is it's unique. Just who was there when you really look into the history and the artifacts, it's mind blowing that this place even existed. And 50 years ago, any type of culture and technology and architecture like this wasn't supposed to exist on the West Coast. And here we have this massive complex, and we've only uncovered about 2% of it. We know that it's, I believe, 8 square miles in size. Unfortunately, um, town was built on top of most of it, so it can't be excavated. But there's the pyramid that's there in Teotihuacan is covered in a clay that has lasted for 3,000 plus years, and I can't get the stucco on my house to last more than 15. You know,
seriously, yeah,
and,
I get it.
and the sightings of paranormal and aerial phenomena there is incredible. You talk to the people from the local town, and they whip out their cameras or their cell phones, and they're just showing you all this UAP that's constantly over, or the things that they found that weren't supposed to be there, like Maya vases. Um, and the Maya were 560 miles plus away, and that type of travel just wasn't supposed to happen. And just the name, we actually know what this place was called because we found one of the ball court goals inside, and it had the name of it, of Teotihuacan. And the name is unique because it's known as the calendar masters, or the people, or controllers of time. And it kind of makes you wonder, well, how are they controlling time? Or and why was it such a huge meeting location for all the cultures and civilizations in Mesoamerica, that they all came to this location? And they talk about the anthropologists that are there now currently say, well, they came to worship their deities, um, to give homage and play the ball game and give sacrifice to it. But what if it was that they came to see their living deities? And we're talking about them being people of great stature, being giants, being an older race that was at the end of its time on this planet. And these people were looked upon as the gods. They were enslaved, or they
Mhm.
enslaved us, the human race, humanity. And you go into deeper, and you talk about, there's so many different varieties of giants. And when you start looking at the lineages and the history, and you can almost track their migration patterns between what's currently the United States and Mexico, even down into Costa Rica, down into South America. And then you match up what the conquistadors had said in regards to Patagonia giants that they were taking back to the King of Spain. It's just incredible that even the giants didn't really die out until about sometime in the 19th century. You were still finding them even all the way up into Nevada.
Um, I just want to, when we look at things, I'm going to pull this one picture up, Patricia, that the one for Aztec. Can you pull that one in there? That one picture. Now, when you look at this, if you are a person of any logic at all, how old is this? How old is this city, James?
Yeah, this is Teotihuacan, just northeast of Mexico City, and we don't know. We don't have an exact date. I believe it's a lot older than what we're taught. And interesting is when we go back into the history, it looks like the person that was in charge of the architectural creation and the building of it was a giant, was one of these seven brothers that survived a major cataclysmic event. And you're talking about as they've done excavations, they're continuously, finding new underground areas. As a matter of fact, I was there a few years ago and they were excavating in front of the Pyramid of the Moon. And we found out that there were a lot of artifacts that were located that the public doesn't know about because they're still trying to figure out how to be able to put it in the timeline because some of it doesn't make sense. And they've found some unique items like a large amount of liquid mercury, and they're not quite understanding if it was used for ceremonial purposes or what. And what they're doing is they're still trying to fit it into this old timeline that needs to be updated, and that these people are just out of the archaic period, and there's no way they could have done what we see them doing. And we've got to move past that so that we can start seeing it with current technology's eyes and what we know as a human race we're capable of doing. It could have easily been done before, and it was just lost in that information lost because of something that occurred in the past that caused that forgetting of the
Yes,
history
that
or
amnesia
the
we seem to have.
amnesia. Yeah, the worldwide amnesia
When
almost.
when you look at those pictures of that, like that last picture we had up there of the Aztec temple, um, when you look at that, and Patricia, will you throw that back up there? When you look at that, now just imagine the level of skilled tradespeople and the number of the different kinds of tradespeople. You'd have to have engineers and designers and surveyors. Good Lord, stone workers, people that do masonry, people that do look at the angles and the just think of the geometry and the mathematics alone that it would take to put something like this together. These are
And look,
not people who are primitive, not by any stretch. I mean, look at that thing. That's amazing.
yeah, and look at the amount of buildings. Think of the population that was here. Look at what's around there, and there's still, if you look back in the background, the tree line, none of
Hmm.
that's been excavated yet. I mean, Teotihuacan continued way out. The main road that we see, the Avenue of the Dead that we see running through here, actually continued for several kilometers past what most people believe. It went a lot farther past the buildings that we currently know as Teotihuacan. So imagine what the population was like. I mean, how do you do that? We continuously, as we advance in our timeline, we're learning just how large the population of Mesoamerica was, and it's mind blowing.
Do we know what's in the middle or in the center of those structures? Do we are there like you know rooms and passageways and
We know, well, the public knows for sure that there's an underground system, and some of that's been, made public to where we know. But a majority of the pyramid itself is just stone. Now, is
Mhm.
that not to say that there may be an interior that we're not aware of. It's possible. It may not have been located yet, or it may just have been kept from the public. And for what reasons, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, I'm aware of the underground systems that run between the pyramids and other locations. There's mica chambers in other parts of the city that are underground. But I've never been inside myself, and I don't know anybody that has.
Do we know what kind of stone? I'm sure we know what kind of stone this is.
I'm not aware of everything. You got to remember that there's a lot of volcanic activity. Several of the largest volcanoes are right there behind it. You can see them.
Mm-hmm.
And there's multiple different types of stone that has been brought in. The newer pyramids are made with, and I'm not great with the geology, so I couldn't tell you, but there's multiple different colored pyramids throughout the complex as well that were probably made with different material.
And was that complex, was it occupied by just one group of folks like the Aztec?
No. So, well, this was pre-Aztec by minimum 1,000 years. But as we continue to go down into lower levels, we're locating new cultures that we're not quite aware of yet.
Mm-hmm.
And they're in the process of trying to figure out. There was so much occupation at Teotihuacan that there's all this overlap, and it makes it extremely difficult to be able to say who was here and when. But we are aware of the fact that the city existed at least 500 to 1,000 years more than what we've originally been told. And that's just based upon what we're finding now underneath the avenue and underneath the other roads and underneath the pyramids, that there was more there before even that was put into play.
So these structures, of course, these structures were occupied when Europe, especially Spain, started coming over, the conquistadors, and started to doing their, well, I guess it's pillaging. Okay.
Nice way of putting it.
Cortez and Coronado and the rest of them that came here in those years, which was what, the 15th century?
Right.
If I got my timeline, my history right. And the famous Aztec king Montezuma. Now, where was he? Where was Montezuma in all of these areas?
Montezuma was in what's current day Mexico City. It was known as Tenochtitlan.
Okay.
And he was the emperor of the Aztec, which was more of an empire. They would go out and conquer all these different cultures and bring them in. And
of course, these structures were there at that time.
Oh, yeah. They were there. And they were the Aztecs themselves were as interested in the history as we are, because
did they know who built them?
They don't know who built them. And that's the issue is.
Well, I never knew that.
Yeah, they're not sure who was there, because remember, the Aztec actually migrated from the desert southwest down into Mexico. They were the last of this pre-Columbian culture and civilization, before the conquest took place.
So the oldest that we know are the Olmecs.
Are the Olmec, correct, which goes back about, that we know of, 3,600, 3,700 years ago. So
they would certainly have a little bit more knowledge of who built these structures, but these had to be somebody somewhere in the stream of time has to have a record of this, I would imagine, somewhere.
Hopefully.
Or an oral record, if not a written record.
Yeah, and again, the issue was the conquistadors and the Spanish Catholic clergy came in, and they said this was the devil's work if it was any type of codex or scroll. of these indigenous people that needed to be brought into God, and all that devil's work was burned and destroyed in the name
We
of.
Yes, we have a habit of completely erasing our past when it does not fit with today's um, understanding of things. And that continues even to today. If you look in the Middle East, of what's going on with some of our ancient of our ancient sites in the Middle East being destroyed by religious zealots. But I think it goes further than that. I'm not, and that's topic for another discussion. I don't think it's just some some religious zealots riding through the desert deciding that this temple needs to be torn down.
Right.
I think there's a whole lot more to it than that. But so have you ventured down into South America?
Yes. So I've been in Argentina all the way down to Patagonia. Attempted to go to Antarctica, but the weather was so bad we had to turn back around.
Have you had
So
a chance to go down to see the Nazca lines?
I have not. I haven't seen the Nazca
That's
lines.
kind of
No.
on my bucket list too.
No, mine too. Yeah.
But
These huge
South America,
geoglyphs.
South
Yeah.
America, yes, exactly. Certainly, and you do a lot of work and study and research in the petroglyphs and pictographs and things of up here in Utah. And I would imagine we find a lot of that in Mesoamerica and in South America. Do we
Well, no,
really?
not quite as much, and that's because of the weather. It's a lot more arid in the desert Southwest, so um, that type of historical data is capable of surviving more so than in other parts of the world, especially when you're getting into jungle or where there's a lot of erosion from water. Um, so there's different artifacts. There's a lot more gold artifacts that are found in Central and South America, which are really interesting because not only are you able to see what has been carved from the gold or what's carved into the gold, but just the work, the metallurgy that went into it is a telltale sign as well into the history. Um,
Now, these folks down there, all of Mesoamerica, the Mayans, the Aztecs, the Olmecs, they had a connection to the cosmos. They had a connection to the stars. They knew a lot about astronomy. Now, some of those buildings, they look like modern day observatories. Is that what those were?
yeah, there's the one at Chichen Itza looks exactly like a modern day observatory
Has a
and
domed roof?
domed roof. And what's really interesting is a lot of these megalithic structures or their observatories are aligned to, you know, certain stars or groupings of stars for a reason. And we've really only in the last 70 years recognized that and really gone into looking deeper into what the connection is between the stars above, our head,
Mm-hmm.
and why the alignments were so accurate and precise, why they took the time to do that, and why was certain observatories specifically set up to watch certain planets, things of that nature. And it's just interesting because
You said they had an interest in Venus.
yeah, the Maya had a lot of the Mesoamerican cultures had this complete fascination about the planet Venus, and they've created cyclical calendars, and the calendar systems almost seem like it's more of, instead of just for agricultural purposes, it's almost as if they were tracking something because it was that important to them. And the anthropologists and archaeologists will say, well, it was for agricultural reasons, so that they knew when to grow the
Mm-hmm.
maize, when to plant, when to harvest. But they
I
were they were just,
I think it goes further than
it
that,
goes a
don't you?
lot further. They were tracking it in such great detail, and when you add that to what was being captured in the codices that are still around, which are four of them pre-Columbia, they were tracking it because something happened between Venus and the planet Earth that led to a major cataclysmic event, and they wanted to be ready for the next time. So it seemed to be that it was occurring in this cyclical nature, whether that be as, the solar system is traveling through the galaxy and we're coming into contact with something that we've lost knowledge of in our current day and age.
Mm-hmm.
But it had to have gone well beyond that. There was a reason for it. And Venus plays into the underworld and this notion of hell, and then this coming up and being reborn into the third, fourth, or fifth world, and that there was a loss of the world in the past because of fire, because of water, because of animals. It's really interesting, the history. And in the past, we haven't been willing to take them for their word. They're like, oh, they're indigenous. They were running around chasing, animals before, us,
Well,
and we're so much better than they are.
you know what?
And it's just not true.
I know. You know what? My response to this whole business of we're doing this because this is a calendar for us. This tells us when the plant and when the harvest and blah. Look, I grew up on a farm in central Illinois. Okay. We did not need the stars, or the planets. We didn't need Venus. We didn't need any constellations to tell us when it was time to get out there in the field and get the crop in. We didn't need another planet or another grouping of stars to tell us when it was time to combine the corn or to harvest the wheat. We knew it. And there is other explanations for why people were so fascinated with what was going on in the cosmos back in those years. I don't buy the whole farming solution there. I just don't.
No. And there's a lot more to astrology when you start delving into the history from these Mesoamerican cultures and other cultures and civilizations throughout the world. Astrology is far more important than astronomy, because it was putting together not just astronomy, but a story, a historical story, and tying in so much more into these groupings of stars for a reason, so that that this information could last for thousands, if not millions of years. And unfortunately, something happened in our distant past where we lost a great deal of this knowledge. A large part of time was lost to us. And I think that maybe the last cultures that were aware of it were from Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. And unfortunately, we've lost what it is, and it's extremely important. And there has to be some type of artifacts or depository of knowledge and information that was secreted away. You hear it being under the Sphinx. There's also the possibility that I've been, in northeastern Utah, which is what we're looking into, that there's another one of these depositories in the Unita Mountains. There could very well be one in South America and Peru. And these people were smart, and they knew what happened, and they knew they needed to have that information available to people in the future. Unfortunately, a lot of the elites knew about it, and they've kept that information only to a very select group, and they may have destroyed a lot of that. But there still has to be hidden information around the world that we've just lost knowledge about, that hopefully we find and is going to help us out in the future.
So James, do you have any future plans of heading back down there to do some more research?
Yeah, I will be there in March. We'll be back in the Yucatan. We're going to be going to Ekbalam, which is a newer site. Not a lot of excavation has taken place there, so there's a lot of discovery that needs to be done, and that's the best, because there's a lot of virgin ground that hasn't been broken open yet. It's been non-invasive to to this point. And if it's anything like what has been found from the small amount that has been excavated, it's going to be amazing finds.
And you're going to be taking your equipment down there, your ground penetrating radar, and all of your.
Some of it, not all of it. It takes a lot to get it.
My next question is, what does it take to get all that equipment down there?
Yeah, it takes a pretty large vehicle, and I worry about taking that much equipment into Mexico because I don't want it to disappear or be taken away. Yeah. So I try to limit what I take. I do have a 3D ground imaging system. We discussed it on the first show, I think, a little bit. I wear it around my ankle, and then I hold the tablet, and it's amazing because I can put my jeans or my pants over it. You have no idea. And they just think there's just some crazy American on top of their pyramids walking, backwards and forwards and sideways.
Non-destructive examination.
Yep.
Which is the best way to do it anyway. You've also, all right, now let's head back north a little bit. What have you been doing up in Utah in the Uinta Basin recently?
Yeah, so we were there in October. There were several sites that we had been aware of that were very important to the Spaniards. And we're talking about before 1776 when they supposedly got there, that there's a couple hundred more years of information available. And we have found out about a location in the high Uintas that shouldn't exist. And the USGS has labeled it as a mesa, which it's not. It's a rock structure, just massive, tons and tons of boulders making up this mountaintop, or mesa as they call it, in the middle of Utah. There's nothing else like it. And whether it's partially man-made or completely, it's just unique. And on top of it are 3 monument structures that were put there by the Spaniards. And we're in the process of trying to understand what these 3 monuments were trying to refer to, because they're in a triangular formation. One of them has a sight hole. Probably the other 2 did at some point in time, and they've either collapsed or were purposely knocked down. So they're several feet smaller than the one that still exists with the sight hole. And it's so difficult to get up there because of the amount. It's nothing but boulders, tons of large boulders, rock boulders everywhere. So it's very difficult to get equipment up there without a helicopter.
Right. Yeah. I have, you have a great YouTube channel, and I would encourage anyone who is listening to this particular podcast to check out James Keenan's YouTubes. You recently did some work up at Mount Wilson.
Yes.
Now not only you're an anthropologist and an archaeologist, but you also deal a little bit with the paranormal, which is the other side of the James Keenan that I would like to get into.
Yeah. You know what I tell everybody? I'm a firm believer that cataclysmic events, lost, distant history, and the paranormal are intertwined. There's no way around it. That there is so much pointing to a different type of travel. And if you know me, I talk about this interdimensional capability, whether it be through rock portals or some other type of portal. They existed. There's just so much data through oral tradition, through objects, artifacts, through structures that look like they're doorways, and they have these little indentions in them, circular indentions, where it looks like something needed to be placed into it to maybe activate it. And there's an alteration that needed of sound, frequency and vibration. And they're all over the world. They're very similar. And whether it be Native Americans or other indigenous people of whatever location in the world, they all talk about the same thing having occurred in the past, and that they were capable of altering the rock or whatever the portals or the doorways or gateways are made of through vibration and frequency shift, which can easily be done through chanting, music, and maybe altering your thought through different thought processes that we've just lost knowledge of. That includes fasting. Yeah. So
Seriously,
I don't discredit anything, and for us to think now that we're far more advanced than people in the past, we have the same brains, the same capacity.
I
We're all
think that
humans. We haven't changed
I
that
think
much in
that
10,000 years.
that's an excellent point, James. We today, you're right. We have the same brain capacity. We have the same capacity to learn, the same imagination, the same curiosity as we did 10,000 years ago. Nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed.
You wear a lot of hats. This is what makes you such a fascinating guy. Your latest YouTube had dealt with what's going on at Mount Wilson. I noticed that you were up there with Robert Bigelow, Colin Kellner. I think Jacques Vallée was with you on that.
Well, I wasn't. They weren't with me.
You weren't with. Okay.
No, they were there in the 1990s, and
okay.
Not many people know that Bigelow and Nids had a different ranch before Skinwalker Ranch. As a matter of fact, they learned about Skinwalker Ranch while they were on Mount Wilson Ranch outside of Pioche, Nevada. And there's this huge story that goes into that as to how Bigelow learned of it.
Yeah, and we're running out of time, so I want to just say that this is conversation for number 3, James, in a few weeks. I absolutely am going to have you back. What a quick hour, huh?
Yeah.
Good golly. Patricia, can you put up his websites there for folks to? There you are. Now you've got this fascinating YouTube channel, James, and I strongly suggest any of our listeners look up James Keenan and get out there on YouTube and have a look at the stuff that you have posted. So, we're going to have to end it here. James, again, it was another fascinating but quick conversation.
Well, thanks for having me.
Maybe in the future I'll get 90 minutes of airtime.
There you go.
We can certainly use the extra half hour. But thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
Yep, it's been fascinating, and I know that you're going to have a wonderful time down there in Central America. And but anyway, everyone, I want to thank you for joining us. I know it was quick, but we want to thank James Keenan for coming on with us. Again, I'm Jim Mann, your host, and in the background there with the pictures and all the help is my program manager, Patricia. And so on behalf of all of us, thank you for joining us. This is Dark Window, and we'll see you again next week. Thank you. Bye. Good night.